I think some people judged him too quickly and too harshly, which is fine because everyone has their own opinion, but I'm here to try and make you understand him and his character a little better. To be honest, Jinshi might be one of those characters that grows on you over time because of the way he is written. And I always say that he gets better, way better. So today I will tell you some of his greatest developments that I have read and understand so far. Firstly, let's list out all his flaws because that's where the character development begins. So in the beginning, he was portrayed as persistent, clingy, childish, and a little annoying. He'd shown traits of being a masochist and was definitely someone who didn't communicate properly sometimes. He was a pushy person who often crossed boundaries, and most importantly, he was a person who doesn't understand the meaning of no. There isn't any specific volumes or chapters where we see his character development. Instead, he understands a lot of things slowly, and in one way or another, Maomao plays an important role in that. Now let's look at how he's brought up. In Volume 3 Prologue, we see him waking up from a dream/nightmare, where he saw the previous emperor getting scared of Empress Dowager, his wife, as he tries to give Jinshi something. And he also saw the previous emperor's mother. At that time, he was so young, he didn't understand anything and only felt fear. But later they told him that the man he thought was his father was actually his older brother. Those were obviously lies to protect him, but it does make me feel bad that he doesn't get to know about his real father up until the latest volumes. So that prologue clearly shows that he grew up in the palace seeing all the power play, which I think really affects his way of thinking. As one of you said that he thinks love is about power, that's why he always tries to overpower Maomao and always tries to win in whatever game that they think they started. One more reason for him to always try to be the one in control, though it's not really possible because his partner is someone like Maomao, but still, I think him growing in that environment is a little cause of why he is the way he is. Plus, he doesn't really get to live his childhood, so we can't really blame him for acting like a child, or in other words, acting his age. I mean, he's just 20 years old up until Volume 5, and Maomao isn't even bothered by it, and in fact, she actually likes him even more when he's like that. If you're an anime watcher, you know that he's not a eunuch, and if you're a manga reader, you know that he's a royal person. A person who gets everything he wants as he grew up. So he clearly never understands the word no, especially when it comes to women. He knows that he's charming and believes that he could get anyone he wants, that is, until he met Maomao, who looked at him like he was nothing but a bug. But I find it so interesting that he doesn't understand that he's bothering her, or in bold words, harassing her. I mean, he himself got mobbed and even harassed by not only women but men as well. So I think in his mind he was probably thinking that she knew his true emotions. That led us to his lack of communication skills. The first time I strongly believed that they really need to communicate was the time when he thought that Maomao probably already figured out who he was, while she was dodging it like a poisoned arrow. That led to a series of events and the frog scene came into existence. Now he gets better at explaining himself, especially after Maomao points out in Volume 7 as Jinshi brings up Lumen after stopping her from fleeing again. She took the empty teacup and was about to leave, but Jinshi caught her wrist. "You're always trying to put me off," he said. "I can't imagine what you mean, sir," she replies. Staying in this room was dangerous, and she wanted to get out while she could, but he wouldn't let go of her. "Soren feels quite urgently that I should take a consort of my own," he said. "She claims it would mean less work for me." I'm sure she's right. Maomao was intent on acting as if the matter didn't concern her, while she just dressed him up for a nap not a second ago. "You know what I'm trying to say. How can you act so indifferent? Are you that desperate to avoid me?" he asked, and she nearly said yes, but slapped a hand over her mouth before that. However, it was too late. "Were you about to blunt out a yes?" he asked. "Pay it no mind, sir." She tries to play it cool, but he scowls at her. He has dark bags under his eyes. He should stop wasting time with me and get some sleep, Maomao thought. But before she could say anything, Jinshi said, "I can see why Sir Lumen looks so harassed all the time. I can practically even understand how our honored strategist must feel." At that, Maomao's ears started ringing. Jinshi was tired. She knew that. He had nowhere to vent his frustration, and on top of that, he was suffering from lack of sleep. She thought that at any other time, he might have taken more care. Strangely, it wasn't the mention of the strategist that upsets her the most. It was the name Lumen that keeps revibrating in her mind. Because that day, she had that rarest of things, a difference of opinion with her father, Lumen, related to the mystery part of that novel. And in her mind, Jinshi had seized the opportunity from it. Maybe he wasn't the only one who was tired that day. Maomao hadn't been sleeping so well herself. So at last, she exploded. You're forever telling me that I need to use my words, Master Jinshi. But you are in no position to criticize. Everything you say to me, everything you do, it's like it's calculated to save you from ever having to actually say what you truly mean. You make me figure it all out. You know you remind me of someone. And then she goes on to tell him about a man who was in love with one of the girls at the brothel, but never expressed his feelings. As a result, he lost her to someone else, and would often come back to the brothel to drink and complain. Maomao believes that he could have avoided that heartbreak if he had been more direct with his feelings. After she was done, she was surprised at the amount of words she had just spoken. And Jinshi was no less startled, but the shock soon left his face, replaced by something else. He got off the bed and stared down at her. Shit, now I've done it, she thought. She had given him the piece of her mind, and now he was about to give her one back. He was looking at her, almost embarrassed, ready to give his heart out. Finally, he managed, "Now listen to me, Maomao, listen close. I'm going to make you my wife." He said it. He actually said it. I might have been giggling and kicking my feet, but to her, it sounded like a death sentence. Jinshi was blushing so hard, but Mama was completely pale. "I wish there was an immortal who could turn back time," she mumbled. "Your internal monologue is showing," he snapped. He couldn't quite bring himself to meet her eyes, yet he didn't let go of her wrist. At last he sighed. "Be that as it may, you're right that with things as they stand, making you my wife could only harm you. Neither of us wants that." He took a sip from the pitcher by the bedside in an effort to bring down his flush. "For you, I will remove every obstacle that keeps us apart. One day, just know that." With that, he buries himself under the covers. "I won't let what you fear come to pass. I swear it." I don't know how can anyone hate him after this scene. And just so you know, his proposal wasn't just filled with fake promises. He gave it his best to clear out the path for Maomao so that they could be together, even to the point of hurting himself. This brings us to his other trait, being a masochist. So one of the first reasons Maomao thought of when he proposed was that she doesn't want to go up against Gyokyo, because Maomao used to serve her and respect her even after she left. And now Consort Gyokyo had become the empress, and she had a son who gets in line for the crown. So in a way, Jinshi becomes a potential challenge for them, as he's also in line for the crown in the people's eye, whether he likes it or not. Now to eliminate that fear from Maomao's heart, he literally burned Gyokyo's mark on his lower abdomen to declare his loyalty to her. That too, right in front of Maomao's eyes. Off topic, but I loved how she was so pissed at him, and not just at that time. She spent the whole volume 9 treating his injury and being mad at him, continuously telling him that he needs to stop hurting himself. I can't say if there's any development on this part of his character. I just wanted to add this part because I loved it so much. But I do remember that he said that he won't do it again, or something like that. I'm not sure. Okay, so let's go back to his childhood for the last time, to talk about his obsession. We have seen in the manga that his supposed mother, Empress Dowager, asked Soren, his caretaker, to hide away his favorite toys, because he would only play with them and get obsessed to a point that once they get taken away from him, he would cry and sulk, unless he gets them back or Gaoshun finds him something new. Now, even though it was already cleared out in the anime that he doesn't see her as a toy, as he lets her go himself, however, his obsession part kinda still stays, but in a healthy way, because he begins to understand the meaning of consent. I mean, in the beginning, we have seen this countless times, and by the way, it's shown a bit more in the manga than in the anime. Like in these panels, he is literally up in her face, while in the anime, he's keeping a little distance, which I must admit was a great thing to do, because at that time, I'm pretty sure a lot of people didn't know that he was just a year older than Maomao, and might have considered him as an adult creepy dude. Also, I'm not justifying his actions or anything, I'm just giving away my thoughts, attempting to make you see him as a layered character. Okay, so this process starts after the whole frog scene. That time I've noticed that he never really apologizes for always being pushy with her, but he does realizes that he crossed a line in that cave and tries to make up to her. This is one of my favorite panels from the manga. As he stood outside her room, he said, "You don't have to let me in if you don't want to." Through the crack in the door, she could see him turn and lean against the wall. "I'm sorry for upsetting you." He apologizes first. She scratches the tip of her nose, a little annoyed. I haven't given it a second thought. In fact, I should apologize to you. She'd been so insistent about decently sized after all. Anyone would lash out, even Jinshi, even at Maomao. Then a hand reached out through the crack of the door. Maomao involuntarily took a step back. Don't be afraid, he said. I just want to give this to you. He set a cloth bundle on the crosspiece. Maomao reached out for it curiously. There's something I promised myself that I would tell you when I finally give this to you, he said seriously. But our girl was long gone, because what he had given her was the ox bezoar that she wanted. She threw open the door, thanks him, and then closed it again. The pounding on the door continued, but in her ears it seemed only a faint drumming in the background. Look, I love Maomao, but she really does need to listen when people talk. And I'm so glad that she goes through her own character development because like him, her character is flawed too. But this video is about Jinshi, so let's go back to him. After this scene, he kind of got to know that he shouldn't cross boundaries, but he still wanted her to respond to his feelings. And he still doesn't understand the whole consent thing, which again depends upon a lot of things, and the storyline being in a historical setting also makes the list. But he gets it completely and properly after getting what he wanted and realizing that it's not exactly what he wanted. Yep, I meant the time when she kissed him in volume 5, after he had pushed her down once more. For people who don't know, this video has the whole scene. I didn't explain it, the comments explained it pretty well. In short, Maomao pushed all his buttons again by dancing with someone else while wearing his hair stick and proposing to him that he should marry someone else while he sneaked away from a banquet to be with her. He wanted her to understand that she was the only one he wanted to marry and kinda choked her in frustration, which again is not his brightest moment, but believe me, this was the last time he had forced himself on her. I personally didn't dislike him too much even then, because even at that time he regretted his decision. Like he was sitting on a couch brushing his fingers across his mouth, as if to confirm for himself what had touched them just an hour before. He could still see it when he closed his eyes. Back then he hadn't been able to see her well, and yet it seemed to him that he could remember her so clearly the moment she decided not to sit back and let him do what he wanted with her, the moment she had kissed him. At first, he felt a combination of disappointment and relief, and then the regret. Okay, so some people say that this scene was mistranslated, and maybe it is, but I liked it for what it was, because it highlighted his development and made me fall harder for him. Also, I've read that the author didn't even like Jinshi much, as he was just another character for her. And in fact, initially he was supposed to die after Gaoshun betrays him. But the author's sister and relatives were a fan of Jinmao, so she kept him and gave him character development instead, which honestly starts after this volume. From there, he doesn't approach her in a clingy way or force himself on her. He becomes more mindful and turns into the sweetest, most lovable character ever. He honestly changes so much up to a point in volume 12 where he clearly says that he is restraining himself because of her, and she even teases him about it. They were on a ship returning back to the capital, and she had a rough day, so she got up to be with Jinshi. And by then, she seemed to like his company a lot more. And not just that, she also initiated a conversation with him, asking what he'd do once they get home. What do I want to do? You know, there's one thing, he said. What's that, sir? She asked, and his hand brushed Maomao, setting against it. Is that what you wanted to do? Maomao asked. There are other things too, he said. But I can't. I'm restraining myself as hard as I can. It's not easy. His eyes drafted down to the figures on the deck. Maomao by now knew very well of how Jinshi felt for her, and though it made it slightly awkward to be up so close to him, but at the same time it wasn't that unpleasant to her now. She also knew that what she felt for Jinshi was not a burning passion. She couldn't respond to him with the same feelings that he brought to her, but at the same time there weren't that many people in the world with whom she could feel this safe. By then she was starting to figure out what her own feelings were and had begun to believe that she was supposed to accept them, so her hand still sat against Jinshi's. Nothing more had happened, which was fine by her, but now she wasn't sure when to pull her hand away. Maomao, he called her name, and at the same time she turned to look up into Jinshi's face, she found his face coming down toward hers. The touch of his lips was so light, so casual that for a second she doesn't even know what happened. At first he didn't say anything. Then realization hits her. What, are you embarrassed? She exclaimed. He was turning red at this simple action. No, I've restrained myself and I mean to continue restraining myself, he was telling her. And before she could stop herself, she calls out, Restrained? You didn't restrain yourself so much before. I didn't. He appeared to remember something and turned grim. "Don't worry, sir, I won't get back to you for it this time," she said, and he struggles to find words. So she asked, "You'd rather I did?" In response, he pursed his lips and looked at her. "I rather thought you despised me." This time it was her turn not to say anything. Instead, she glanced away from him. "I think I don't despise him, do I?" she thought. Then they quietly looked down toward the deck, but Maomao didn't pull her hand away. TMI, I read this scene while I was in a family gathering and was internally screaming the whole time. Because this scene isn't just development on Jinshi's part, but on Maomao's as well. For others, it might not seem like a big deal that she doesn't pull her hand away, but to me, it was such a big move. And to be very frank, before reading past Light Novel 5, if you were to ask me if I'd want them to end up together, I'd probably hesitate to say yes. Because as I said, at that time they were still developing their characters. However, as the story progresses and we see how they push and pull trying to understand each other, it becomes clearer that they are meant to be together. There are some even more scenes of them. Like for example, the scene in volume 11 where Jinshi asked for a charge, as he had so much work to do. He was in front of a curtain and she was behind it, and there wasn't anyone on her side. At first, she thought that he wanted a sugar charge, but the charge he wanted was holding Maomao's hand. That scene was so wholesome to me, though I struggled to understand what he did on the back of her hand, so you tell me if you got it. And one of the best part about that scene was how it was a little awkward for Maomao, and how she was blushing, thinking about his reaction, and then getting scared afterwards. So as I said, he changed a lot, and that is one of the reasons for me to love him so much. Because he put efforts and gave her time, space, love, without expecting much from her like he used to. And they pushes each other's boundaries, even get some backlashes, but learns from their mistakes and grow as beautiful characters. Like the first time he had seen Maomao given him an angry glare was when he mentioned Lacan. And from there, he has been cautious. Not just cautious, he even tried not to get them together. In other words, he looked out for her, knowing how much she disliked being around the freak, her father. And how he doesn't use women against her after that one time because he knew how much she looks up to him. Or the fact that he doesn't force her to marry him or return his feelings after she tells him her thoughts on their relationship, and instead promise to clear out the way. And most importantly, I love how he became her safe place. Someone who she could talk to and relax with. Someone who is so different from the pushy Jinshi we saw in the beginning. So believe me when I say that he gets so much better. And you'd know more in details if you read the novel. So start reading them if you haven't already. But keep in mind that the romance is the subgenre for this, and the main focus is on the mystery and drama. Lastly, I would say that I love this series, even though sometimes it makes me double think. But I feel like for me, that is the best part about loving them, because it's a roller coaster ride and it doesn't let me get bored. I just realized I really went all out with the spoilers, so I'm so sorry for giving it to someone who doesn't really wanted them. Still, thank you for listening to me. Take care of yourself and goodbye.
I don't really wanna hurt you, but I can't control the pain. If you're sticking by my side, maybe we could be okay. Okay, maybe you could be the change.